Good morning, everyone. Coffee go. It says we're live. I guess we're live. Trying something new. I'm going live on my computer so I can see what's going on in the group on my phone and trying to just make it all happen. Good morning. Good morning. I dropped my pen. I apologize. I'm running a little bit late. I know I generally try to start around more like 7:30, so thank you for hanging in there with me. I appreciate it. This morning, since we wrapped up our discussion on anger for the past few days, I think we talked about it quite a few days last week, and we wrapped it up yesterday during our live video. So I wanted to use the other selections. I put a few polls out there. Definitely one, I believe, Sunday night, maybe, asking what you guys would like to talk about. So if you missed the poll or didn't get an opportunity to express what you would like, please feel free to send me a message, comment on this video, comment on basically anything, and tell me what you guys would like to talk about. So for today, as the description says in the video, physical impacts of trauma. I want to break that down a little bit because I think a lot of the times we can just assume that the impacts that we carry around are inside. They're emotional, they're things that you can't really see or detect, maybe, but that's not always true. And there are some things that um, we can look at and see there are differences in our brains and our bodies from a person who has not been through actual trauma and people that have, or if they're able to take a look at that specific person before the trauma and after the trauma, you can actually see your brain chemistry and your brain architecture, what it's actually made up of, change. And so that's what I want to take a look at today. I posted a meme that actually sparked this. I don't know if you call it a meme, infographic. It wasn't funny, it was informational. So I'm guessing like an infographic. And I posted it on our group, I think a day or so ago, a couple days ago, and it really, I was very interested in it, and I kept going back to it and looking at it. And I thought that's something we can talk about and kind of break down and see what we can do to fix it. Because that was the biggest thing that I took from the infographic itself, was that it actually had ways to reverse these effects. So let's go ahead and jump in. Like I said, I took it from an infographic. So what I also did was tried to go in and break down some of the more scientific words that I didn't really understand because I'm not a doctor. I don't have a degree. I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, therapist. I just am a survivor, and I'm curious about it. I've always been curious about it, and I think you guys are curious about it too. So thank you for joining me. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much, and let's go ahead and break this down. Physical impacts of trauma. So starting with our brain, starting at the top with our brain architecture, the way your brain is actually made up. The parts of your brain and the different parts, it's actually physically affected. So you have shrinking in the prefrontal cortex, which is right here in the front of your brain. And in looking that up, I learned that your prefrontal cortex controls your personality. It controls your decision making and your social behavior. It's a lot of responsibility for one part of the brain. And so when you experience trauma, when you're exposed to trauma and your body is reacting to it, your body is physically, these parts of your brain are physically shrinking. You're taking away the part of the brain that is bringing you your personality, is assisting you with your decision making, that's saying, no, this is right and this is wrong. which really makes sense if you think about the fact that once somebody has experienced trauma, like sexual abuse, it's easier for them to then be abused again. And if you think about this and that together, it's really interesting. Hi, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Hello, hello, Guinea. Is it Guinea or Ginny? I'm gonna really ruin everybody's name. I love being on the laptop. I'm doing things a little differently today, and I can see you guys. This is so exciting. Thank you for joining me. So I was just saying that your brain architecture changes. So your prefrontal cortex shrinks. Your personality with that shrinks, becomes smaller. Your decision making and social behavior are impacted. So you just kind of become a smaller version of yourself, and it starts taking away little bits of what makes you who you are, and you become almost like a robot, if that makes sense. I feel like you just become a shell, and you actually physically become a shell. Like you lose, like I said, the things that make you you, which is it's awful. The next part is the shrinking in the corpus callosum. So that's in the center of your brain underneath this major part here. It's right in the center, and it connects your two hemispheres, your left and your right hemisphere. So it connects the interaction of the two hemispheres. It integrates it integrates that interconnection, and integrates your motor function, your ability to move, your sensory function, and cognitive performances. So all of that is going back and forth between your left and your right hemisphere, and shrinking in this middle part, this corpus callosum, really affects your brain overall, your cognitive performance. It can slow down your brain and actually cause you to not be able to think as well, as quickly. It can take away some of your senses, or make it to where they're a little like they're almost not like numb, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't know the correct terminology for it. This is making so much sense in my brain, and when I was reading through these, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what is happening in my body, and I'm really interested in it. So again, shrinking in the corpus callosum, that's integrating your two brains, and shrinking in the hippocampus, which controls your emotional states, your conversion of short-term memory to long-term memory. So your emotional states, if the part of your brain that is regulating and controlling your emotional state is shrinking, do you think you're going to have very heightened reaction to things? Do you think you're going to start to kind of just deal with it and maybe kind of feel helpless and feel like there's nothing you can do? That's probably related to the fact that part of your physical brain is shrinking, that has to deal with your emotional states and your conversion of short-term and long-term memory. That's why maybe sometimes you don't remember. That's why sometimes maybe you're not able to access those emotions as well, because your physical brain, the part of your brain that is supposed to control this and bring this up and regulate it and make sure that you are normal, has shrunk. And the more trauma that you go through, the smaller and smaller and smaller it is. The less time that you take trying to reverse these effects, the potential for more and more and more to take over, and it just kind of you shrink. And the last part of the brain architecture that is affected is your enlarged amygdala. So your amygdala is your emotional responses and your memories of emotional events. And again, this ties back to, that's why you don't remember some of the things. That's why when you've been traumatized, you don't remember some of the things, because your physical brain is shrinking. And the parts of your brain that are converting your short-term memory to long-term memory are shrinking. They're getting smaller. And so that's why we're having a hard time feeling things. We're having a hard time remembering the trauma that happened to us sometimes, especially when we're extremely young. It's even harder. So again, shrinking your prefrontal cortex, your personality, decision making, social behavior. Shrinking in your corpus callosum, which ties your two hemispheres together, lets them talk to each other. It integrates your motor, sensory, and cognitive performances, brings it all together. And then shrinking in your hippocampus, which are your emotional states, your conversion of long-term memory from short-term to long-term memory. And then your amygdala enlarges, which are your emotional responses and memories, emotional events. So that's a lot of information to take in, and it's interesting. And so the resolution to that and the way to counteract this trauma that is shrinking most of your brain and enlarging the parts of your brain that are going to make you overreact, maybe, um, is to have, this is going to sound strange because you've been abused by a person, and now I'm going to tell you that one of the ways of resolving this issue in your brain is to have safe and stable, nurturing connections, to connect with people, to find your personality again, to allow those emotions to come out. You're training your brain to access that portion, and it's like it's kind of like a muscle. The more you use it, the more you flex it, the more it's going to be able to recall faster. It's going to be able, you're training it to do what you want to do. So you have nurturing relationships that are stable and safe. And the more you do that, the better your brain will be, and the more connection you will have. Sorry, my dogs are being crazy again this morning. The next part of it is walking in nature, connecting to nature, and taking deep, clean breaths of fresh air, as fresh as you can get, is amazing. Touching your loved ones, hugs. They say 3 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, I think, of a hug and that physical connection can start to rewire your brain. So that's a big deal. And exercise. And these are all free things. These are all things that you can do as long as you can find safe and stable relationships, which I pray for you, if you don't have them in your life, that you are able to find them, because it is one of the key parts of healing, is to allow yourself to love again and to laugh again and to be yourself again. That's the real beauty. And exercise. I've been preaching this since day one, you guys. Drinking your water, eating healthy foods, moving your body, practicing gratitude, and just being good to yourself, loving yourself. It's important. The next part is the neural pathways in your brain. So this kind of ties in, but you, like I said, you have to rewire your brain. You're retraining your brain from old thoughts and patterns and habits and reactions to new ones that you actually want instead of the old ones that you had to have or learned from somebody else. And I say had to have in that they're survival techniques, they're instincts for survival. They're your fight or flight. They're your run or hide, you know. Whereas when you were experiencing the trauma and you were in the trauma, that was important. You needed that. But now that you're hopefully removed from the trauma, you don't necessarily need those responses as your first set of responses anymore. We kind of have to tear those down and relearn some new ones. If you don't put in the effort of relearning new ones, you're going to be stuck in your old ways of just snapping into those those habitual reactions and emotions and things like that. So you want to rewire your brain out of those old habits. And this is conscious and unconscious. How do you unwire and rewire and deconstruct things that are in your unconscious? You bring them to the conscience. You focus on them. You think about what you're thinking about, which sounds really weird, But there are some practices that you can do to make this a reality and to really understand the things that you do. You do everything you do for a reason. Whether you know the reason or not, you do them for a reason. And so learning to ask those questions of yourself and be not self-critical, but just aware. You're really practicing self-awareness in its most broken down form. Thinking about what you're thinking about. Thinking about how you're feeling, how you're actually feeling, and saying, how am I feeling? Where is this coming from in my body? Where is this coming from in my brain? Does this make sense? All of those things. So the resolution is neurofeedback, is getting your brain functioning and firing, and then doing meditations and practicing mindfulness, positive self-talk, talking to yourself as if you were talking to your young child or your best friend or the person that you love. We have to be loving ourselves. We have to rewire our brain from the anger and the trauma to say, you have to really, care about yourself, love yourself. Jocelyn says using your hypervigilance to your benefit. Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Think about like, oh gosh, what is this? Oh gosh, what is that? Instead of like, maybe try to not be so, when I'm hypervigilant, I'm so anxious. So maybe not the panicky type of anxious as in hypervigilance, but definitely that constant, like, what if this, what if that, what am I doing here? That can definitely be helpful. It's another, absolutely, you're so right. So again, the neural pathways, rewiring your brain, finding new ways. Hormones. This is really big because when you are in a constant state of fight or flight, like survivors typically are, it releases terrible hormones in your body. We've all heard of, I believe we probably all have heard of the cortisol, and that's the stress hormone, and that literally breaks down your body and causes aging and illness and all these bad things that we don't want. We've already spent part of our life dealing with trauma. We don't need to end our life any sooner by our own actions or by not taking care of ourselves and allowing the cortisol to continue to be that strong hormone that's taking over your body. When we're stressed out, when we're scared, our bodies are releasing this cortisol, and it can play a very, very, very high toll on, it can take a high toll on your body. And I'm probably going to say this wrong. I Googled it, but it still kind of sounds weird. So it's called ghrelin. I don't know. Ghrelin. Ghrelin. That's how Google said it. In Googling it, I learned that it was the hunger hormone. So it actually tells your body when you are and when you are not hungry. And so this is kind of where maybe your body might be a little different than somebody else's. I have always been super small. My whole life has been traumatic. So I have the cortisol running through my body, and I believe that my body, I don't know this for a fact, I'm just kind of tying it all together, but being the fact that I am so small and have a hard time getting an appetite, I believe that my body doesn't produce enough of the hunger hormone, of the ghrelin. Maybe some people's body reacts in that it produces too much, like it does the cortisol. It's producing all of this hormone, and you just need to, that's where the emotional eating could maybe come from in your brain, from your hormones. So taking care of this and really trying to reduce this in the exact way to fix the imbalance of the cortisol hormone is to produce oxytocin in your brain. Google ways to produce oxytocin and then do them. at least one of them. Hold a baby, pet a dog, get your body moving, produce hormones in your brain that are good. That is how you're going to counteract the bad cortisol in your brain. And I am so excited about this because, like I said, these physical things that we can do to change the way our bodies are and the physical impacts that we've had from our trauma, it gives us so much control. And I feel like we all really can relate on wanting and needing control in our life after being out of control. And this is a beautiful thing. This is really beautiful in that these are physical ways, free, that you can change the things that happen to you. You can take it into your own hands and change it. You can change the architecture of your brain back to what you want it to be. By having safe and stable relationships, by connecting with people, by being here with me and establishing this friendship that I really hope to build with you guys. And I appreciate you so much for being here. It's so awesome. And moving your body and having that physical touch, that love, it really is going to reshape your brain. The neural pathways, finding ways to meditate. And I know it's really hard for people. It was so hard for me when I first started meditating, and I didn't think I can do it, and I didn't think it was realistic. I have a million thoughts going on in my head. How am I supposed to turn them off and sit quietly? But with practice, it really is possible. And then the hormones, the imbalance of the cortisol hormone and the ghrelin of your hunger hormone. So again, I'm going to have to break this into 2 sessions. I started a little bit late today, and I do apologize for that, but I really only have until 8 o'clock, and I've got to jump in the shower and get ready for work. So being that it's 8:01, I want to thank you so much again for being here with me this morning. Thank you for those who watched live. Thank you so much for your input and just for sticking through this 20 minutes with me here, 22 minutes. I will be back on tomorrow morning, 7:30, right on the dot, I hope, talking about the rest of the 6 ways that our trauma physically impacted our body and how we can reverse those or change that. So please join me again tomorrow. I really appreciate you guys being here. You are worthy of healing. You are loved. You are not alone, ever. And please just take care of yourself in any way that you can, in any one little way today. Just show yourself some love and show yourself some care, because you deserve it. You really do. So have a great day. Jocelyn, you're awesome. Thank you. And I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.